chains intact. He went away with the Muslims and began to behave like one. When his father saw this, he came to his son and gave him a resounding slap. Then he told the Holy Prophet, "O Muhammad, this treaty is the first step of reconciliation between you and us, and as per its terms you have to surrender my son to me." The Holy Prophet agreed to it and surrendered Jundal to his Kafir father, but upon the condition that he would be protected and not harmed. Suhail ibn Umar agreed to this condition. When it was time to hand over Jundal to the disbelievers, Jundal protested, "O Muslims, I have become a Muslim. How will I return amongst the polytheists?" The Holy Prophet told him, "Go, but have patience. Allah will provide ease to you in this way only. We cannot go against the terms of the treaty." Suhail caught his son's hand and led him away. He did not remain true to his promise and tortured his son very much. This incident proves the importance of the fulfillment of a promise. The same incident is mentioned in the exegesis of Surah Al-Fath in Tafsir Manhaj as-Sadichin. I will stay here all my life. The following narration is recorded in Bahar al-Anwar. The Holy Prophet promised a man that he would wait for him at an appointed place near a stone. The Holy Prophet waited there, but the man did not turn up. Morning turned into afternoon while the Holy Prophet stood in the blazing sun. Some of his followers saw him and said, "Please stand in some other place." He replied, "I cannot move away from here till that man returns." The man arrived at last. The Holy Prophet said, "If that man had not come, I would have continued to stand till death." Janab al-Ismail and the fulfillment of the vow. The Holy Quran refers to Prophet Ismail as the truthful in promise, in the following verse. And mention Ismail in the book, surely he was truthful in his promise, and he was an apostle, a prophet. Surah Maryam 19:54. Hazrat Ismail had promised to wait for a person, who did not turn up. 3 nights passed but he still kept waiting. However, according to most of the scholars and well-known tradition, the period of his wait was a whole year. During this time he also had to bear untold difficulties and sometimes survived on leaves. Violation of a promise is caused by disbelief. Amir al-Mu'minin, Ali, has mentioned that it is disbelief that causes one to go back on his word and break a vow. He says, "By Allah, Muawiyah is not more cunning than I am, but he deceives and commits evil deeds. Had I not been hateful of deceit, I would have been the most cunning of all men. But the fact is that every deceit is a sin, and every sin is disobedience of Allah, and every deceitful person will have a banner by which he will be recognized on the day of judgment." 11. Allama Majlisi says that the one who commits greater sins is also referred to as a disbeliever in traditions. Hence every type of a deceitful person has been called a kafir in this sermon. It is that disbelief which has its root in the heart and which takes the form of disobedience to Allah's commands. A Muslim is never deceitful. Amir al-Mu'minin, Ali, has said, "Surely fulfillment of pledge is the twin of truth. I do not know a better shield against the assaults of sin than it. One who realizes the reality of return to the next world never betrays." We are in a period when most of the people regard betrayal as wisdom. In these days the ignorant call it excellence of cunning. What is the matter with them? Allah may destroy them. One who has been through thick and thin of life finds the excuses preventing him from orders and prohibitions of Allah, but he ignores them despite capability to succumb to them and follows the command of Allah, while one who has no restraints of religion seizes the opportunity and accepts the excuses for not following the commands of Allah. 12. Violation of promise and falsehood. Some of the Mu'tahids consider violation of a promise to be a kind of falsehood, especially when at the time of promising, one has no intention of fulfilling it. Thus all the verses and tradition denouncing and prohibiting falsehood also apply here, if there are some conditions. According to the fatwa religious decrees of the leading Mu'tahids, it is wajib to honor the terms and conditions of a transaction, and it is obligatory to fulfill them. For example, the buyer can put a condition that if the goods are defective he can return them within 2 months. Or the seller may put a condition that the buyer must not spoil the goods if he wishes to return them. In such situations it is wajib to honor the terms of agreement. Similarly, if the landlord has restricted the use of his premises to anyone Except the tenant has to observe the terms faithfully. Both the parties to a transaction have a right to lay down their terms and conditions. Other mujtahids state that not only is it wajib to honor the terms and conditions of a transaction, but the one who has put them may enforce his rights and insist on the condition being fulfilled. For example, if an employee has laid a condition that he shall be paid his salary on the first day of every month, then not only is it necessary to pay him as agreed, but the employee has a right to demand it on that day, and he can even take it without the knowledge of his employer. At times it may happen that the conditions agreed upon are quite irrelevant to the actual transaction and not directly related to it. Even in these cases it is necessary to fulfill the obligations. In cases where the terms and conditions are such that the parties consider it better to observe them, these conditions do not contribute a right and it is not wajib to follow them to the letter. Fulfillment of promise is a must. In all respects, fulfillment of a promise is so much emphasized in the Quranic verses and the traditions that one should be extremely careful in honoring every type of agreement and pledge. If a person has to give a promise under compulsion and he does not wish to become a sinner, he can use words like maybe, if, or, inshallah, etc. For example, he can say, inshallah, if Allah wills I will do this. To vow or pledge after saying, inshallah. It is the opinion of Allama Hilli, and other mujtahids agree, that every vow or pledge after uttering inshallah or its translation in any other language makes the pledge conditional to the divine will. Hence it is not strictly wajib to fulfill it. But if it is with regard to some promise or condition of an agreement that concerns a wajib act or it is for the avoidance of a haram act, it has to be observed faithfully, even after uttering inshallah. It must however be understood that the promise which is made conditional by saying, inshallah, is not binding, only when the person intends the actual meaning of the term inshallah. That is, he must really mean to subject the matter to Allah's will. If he utters inshallah only for the sake of seeking divine blessings, then it is binding upon him to remain firm upon his vows. It should also be clear that it is not only permitted to disregard a promise of abstaining from a wajib act or to perform a haram act, but it is in fact haram to fulfill it. For example, if one vows to punish his wife or son if they did such and such thing, it is better to disregard such vows and forgive them instead. The Quran says, "And let not those of you who possess grace and abundance swear against giving to the near of kin and the poor and those who have fled in Allah's way, and they should pardon and turn away. Do you not love that Allah should forgive you?" Surah An-Nur 24:22. It means that Allah forgives the sins of those who forgive the wrongdoings of others. Prophet Ayyub, in his oath of beating his wife 100 strokes. In a situation where one has taken an oath in utmost seriousness to inflict punishment, and one does not wish to go against it, it is better to carry out the oath in a manner that a token punishment is given, and the oath is also not violated. For example, Prophet Ayyub saw his wife doing something against his will. He took a vow to hit her 100 strokes after he recovered from the illness. When he recovered, Allah ordered him, "And take in your hand a green branch with 100 twigs and beat her your wife with it once and do not break your oath." Surah Sad 38:44. 1. Wasil ul-Shia. 2. Najul Balaga. 3. Kaisal. 4. Kaisal. 5. Sayfanat ul-Bahar. 6. Usul al-Kafi. 7. Usul al-Kafi. 8. Usul al-Kafi. 9. Sheikh Saduk. Kaisal. 10. Tazib. 11. Najul Balaga Sermon 200. 12. Najul Balaga Sermon 42. The 22nd greater sin. Kayanat. The 22nd greater sin is defalcation or misappropriation of property. Misappropriation of property as a greater sin is stated in the Quran and the authentic tradition related by Abdul Azim from Imam Muhammad al-Taqi, and also from the traditions of Imam al-Sadiq, Imam al-Qadim, and Imam al-Rida, Kayanat is itself an Arabic word. In the tradition of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, is related by Amash. The word, kayanat, is used in the list of the greater sins. Another Arabic word used for misappropriation is gulul. Gulul is used in the narration of Faisal ibn Shazan where he Quotes Imam al-Rida, A. According to some lexicographers, gul denotes misappropriation of a property obtained as spoils of war against the disbelievers which has not yet been distributed among the Muslims. However, other scholars maintain that gulul applies to every kind of embezzlement. The punishment of misappropriation according to the Holy Quran. The Almighty Allah SWT says, and he who eats unfaithfully shall bring that in respect of which he has acted unfaithfully on the day of resurrection. Then every soul be paid fully what it has earned, and they shall not be dealt with unjustly. Is then he who follows the pleasure of Allah like him who has made himself deserving of displeasure from Allah, and his abode is hell, and it is an evil destination. Surah Ali Imran 3. 161-162. In Surah At-Tahrim we find the verse. Allah sets forth an example to those who disbelieve, the wife of Nah and the wife of Lut. They were both under two of our righteous servants, but they acted treacherously towards them, so they availed them not against Allah, and it was said, enter both the fire with those who enter. Surah At-Tahrim 66. 10. Also Allah SWT says, surely Allah does not love the treacherous. Surah Al-Anfal 8. 58. And, O you who believe, be not unfaithful to Allah and the Apostle, nor be unfaithful to your trusts, while you know. Surah Al-Anfal 8. 27. Similarly the Quran says, but if one of you trusts another, then he who is trusted should deliver his trusts, and let him be careful of his duty to Allah, his Lord. Surah Al-Baqarah 2. 283. At another place the Divine Book states, surely Allah commands you to make over trusts to their owners. Surah An-Nisa 4. 58. Breach of trust denounced in the traditions. The Holy Prophet says, one who embezzles a property in his charge and does not deliver it to its owner and dies in such a condition, then he does not die in my community, he does not die a Muslim. When such a person meets Allah, he shall be infuriated with him. And one who purchases an embezzled property knowing that it is embezzled is just like the actual embezzler. 1. Another tradition states, and it will be ordered to throw him in the fire. He will remain in the deep pit of hell forever. 2. The Prophet is also reported to have remarked, if one is Muslim, he must not practice deceit and defalcation. For I have heard from Jibril that deceit and cheating belong to hell. Then he continued, one who cheats a Muslim is not from us, and one who embezzles the believers is also not from us. 3. The following tradition is recorded in the book Al-Kafi. There are 3 qualities that are the sign of a hypocrite even if he prays and fasts and calls himself a Muslim: lying, violating promises and defalcation. This tradition had already been mentioned in the previous discussion. Amir al-Mu'minin, Ali, says, there are 4 things and even if one of them enters a house it causes economic catastrophe and it never remains blessed. Defalcation, thievery, wine and adultery. 4. Thus if one or more members of a household indulge in one of these sins, such a household is deprived from divine blessings. It brings about an economic ruin. It must also be clarified, however, that the house of the thief is deprived of barakat, divine blessings, and not the place where robbery occurs. Misappropriation causes misfortune. The Holy Prophet remarks, trustworthiness causes one to be self-sufficient financially and misappropriation causes poverty. 5. The narrator says that I said to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, there is a lady in Madinah, with whom people leave their daughters for training and education. We have observed that she could maintain herself with so less, but we have never known her to have any financial problem. Imam al-Sadiq remarked, it is because she is truthful and trustworthy. These 2 qualities increase sustenance. 6. Another tradition from the same Imam is as follows. Do not be deceived by the prolonged sajda and ruku of a man, they may be a part of his habits that he could not avoid. See his truth and trustworthiness. Thus it is these qualities that prove righteousness and piety. Anyone could be the owner of the entrusted property. We have numerous traditions dealing with this subject. They emphatically state that it is wajib to guard the trust and haram to misappropriate it, whether the one who entrusts it is a Muslim or a kafir. It is even wajib to protect the goods entrusted by a nasibi, those are openly inimical to all al-Bayt in spite of the fact that the nasibi are the worst kind of people. Hazrat Imam Jafar al-Sadiq says, "Fear Allah, and return the entrusted thing to the owner. Even if the murderer of Ali entrusts me with something, I shall deliver it to him when he desires." Imam also says, "Then fear Allah, and guard the trusts placed by the white as well as the black people. Even if the one who entrusts is from the Khawarij or Assyrian, those who hate Ali, that is, even if he is a confirmed enemy of the Al-Bayt, A man inquired from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, is it allowed to misappropriate the property of a Nasabi? Imam replied, honor the trust of every person who entrusts you with it, or seeks your advice. Even if it is the killer of Imam Hussein, 7. Another similar narration is as follows. Hussein Shabani says that he asked Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, one of your followers considers the property and blood of Bani Umayyah permissible for himself. He is also in possession of some property entrusted to him by the Bani Umayyah. Imam replied, restore the entrusted property to its owner even if they are Majus fire worshippers. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq is also reported to have said, Allah has not sent any messenger but with the order to propagate truth and restoring of trust, whether of a righteous man or a sinner. 8. Muhammad bin Qasim says that he mentioned to Abul Hasan, Imam Musa al-Qadim, regarding the person who had entrusted someone with something valuable. The trustee is an Arab and he is. Example, a wealthy individual outwardly looks with disdain upon the respect enjoyed by a poor person, believing that he deserves to be the recipient of such admiration, fear and love of authority. Also, the envious man is fearful of some hindrance on the part of the person enjoying an advantage or talent or merit that may frustrate his cherished objectives. Such fear manifests itself when one's acquiring or preserving authority over others requires that nobody should share his advantages or merits. For example, one who wishes to be re-elected as the leader of an organization may desire that no other member step forward and exhibit leadership skills such as eloquence of speech and efficiency of organization and mobilization. Viciousness of nature. A human being of vicious nature does not like to see others enjoying any kind of good whatsoever. Such a person always greets news of another's good fortune, for example, in education or business, with sarcasm, pessimism, and ridicule, or with other unethical tactics or conduct. The evil effects of hasad. Envy is one of the deadliest diseases of the heart and it produces additional vices such as hypocrisy, backbiting, slandering, abuse, taunting, and torturing, all of which are grave sins. This hideous condition makes the human heart so narrow and gloomy that its effects pervade the realm of one's inner and outer being. The fears and grief of the Hasid revolve around the person of whom he is envious. The hasad he harbors in his heart blinds him to the virtues of the envied, and he becomes unhappy over the blessings of God conferred upon the Masud, the spiritual light and the divine spark of faith, which makes the human heart greater than anything else in the world, cannot go along with the darkness and narrowness caused in it by hasad. The heart becomes grieved and depressed, the chest narrow and suffocated, and the face grim and frowning. The more this state gains in strength, the more it diminishes the brightness of faith, while this faith is the source of his salvation in the hereafter and the life and vigor of his heart. Eventually this disease reduces the Hasid into a helpless wretch. The Prophet Muhammad said, beware, do not bear enmity with the blessings of Allah. When asked about the people who bear enmity with the blessings of Allah, he replied, those who are envious. Al-Tazali, Sharnaj al-Balagha, Volume 1, p. 315. Imam Ali said, envy is a great trap of Satan. Al-Amati, Gurar al-Hakam wa Durar al-Kalam. Hadith No. 1133. Imam Ali said, a Hasid is a sick person though he may physically appear to be healthy. Gurar, Hadith No. 1963. Muhammad ibn Muslim reports that Al-Imam al-Bakir said, a man may be forgiven for something done in a fit of anger, but hasad devours faith as fire consumes wood. Al-Kulaini, Usul al-Kafi, Volume 2, p. 306, Bab al-Hasad, Hadith No. 1. Imam Far al-Sadiq is reported to have said, Satan says to his soldiers, Instill hasad and disobedience of Allah among them Bani Adam, as these are equal to shirk polytheism in the eyes of Allah. Al-Kalani, Usul al-Kafi, Volume 2, p. 327, Bab al-Baghi, Hadith No. 2. Imam Far al-Sadiq said that Luqman said to his son, there are 3 signs of a hasid. 1. He is a backbiter at the back. 2. He is a flatterer in front. And 3. He is happy when a misfortune befalls the envied. Al-Saduq, Al-Kaisal, page 121, Hadith No. 113. The cure for this disease. If you suffer from this deadly disease, seriously contemplate the enormity of its devastating effects on your faith. Consider taking following steps to purge it from your heart. Know that your envy doesn't harm your Masud, nor does it make him lose any of his favors and merits. You shall ever suffer in grief, pain, and anguish while the Masud is in a state of bliss and joy. In the hereafter as well your envy will benefit your Masud, especially if it results in backbiting or slandering, as your good deeds will be assigned to the Masud. Force yourself to be affectionate with the Masud. The aim of your kindness should be to cure yourself of envy. Your inner self will ask you to ill-treat or hurt him, but you must act against these inclinations and be friendly to him. You must respect him and gradually convince your heart to respect him. Try to see his virtues yourself and think that these are favors of Allah on him. Force yourself to speak in his praise and make his good qualities known to others. Though your behavior will be unnatural in the beginning, since your aim is self-rectification, it will gradually become less artificial. Insha'Allah, day by day this will become a reality and your heart will follow your tongue to appreciate his virtues and good qualities. You should convince yourself and make it understand that your Masud is a creature of God. Perhaps it is God's grace that he has selected him for the advantages and blessings he enjoys that you do not currently possess. If, God forbid, the object of your envy is a scholar endowed with knowledge or piety, you must understand that he is from the chosen ones of God, blessed by great merit. Try to generate love and humbleness towards him. At any stage during your treatment, don't think that this moral vice is not curable. This erroneous notion is inspired by Satan in the lower self al-Nafs al-Amara, who want to frustrate your efforts of curing yourself. Have hope in God Almighty, who has promised that he will guide those who struggle and help, who are mukhlas and sincere ones. God Almighty has invited his servants towards himself by indicating that they should purify their souls from other than God and make them turn exclusively towards him. Mukhlasin are those who worship God in such a way that they don't see themselves in service nor do they take notice of the world or its people, thus they and their actions totally belong to Lord. Thus their state of worship is the deen that God Almighty has chosen for himself and cleared it from the taint of association with other than God, and he has said, Lo, to God belongs sincere allegiance. Al-Din. Al-Khalis. 39. 3. It has been narrated from the great Gnostic al-Shaykh al-Muhaqiq Muhyi al-Din ibn al-Arabi that he said, Lo, to God belongs sincere allegiance, free from the taints of otherness and egoism. And that your extinction in him should be total. The essence, the attributes, the acts and the din should cease to be relevant for you. Lo, until the allegiance is not purified by reality, it will not belong to God. The worship of the sincere ones is the imprint of the manifestations tajalliyat of the beloved God, and nothing passes through their hearts except the essence of the one God. Ikhlas is subsequent to action. One must exercise vigilance, as it sometimes happens that man carries out an action faultlessly without any shortcoming and performs it without riyah, showing off or ujb self-love, but after the action he becomes afflicted with riyah, through mentioning it to others, as pointed out in the following noble hadith. Imam al-Baqir said, perseverance in an action is more difficult than the act itself. He was asked, what is meant by perseverance in action? He replied, a man does some kindness to a relative or expends something for the sake of God, who is one and has no partner. Thereupon the reward of a good deed performed secretly is written for him. Later, he mentions it to someone and that which was written earlier is wiped out, and instead the reward of a good deed performed openly is written for him. Later, when he makes a mention of it again, the vice of riyah, showing off, is written for him instead of the reward written earlier. Al-Kalani al-Kafi, Kitab al-Iman wa al-Kufr, Bab al-Riyah, Hadith number 16. The reality of action is intention. It is the sincere intention and pure purpose on which depend the perfection or defectiveness of ibadat. Worships and thus their validity or invalidity. Spiritual traits constitute the soul's primary character and intentions, to which actions are subservient, making up its secondary character. And as long as self-love remains in the heart and a person remains in the oppressive habitat of the self, he is not a wayfarer toward God musafir ila Allah. Rather, he is one of those who cling to the earth muqalladun ila al-ard. Shirk in ibadah, that encompasses all its levels is the inclusion of the good pleasure and satisfaction of anyone other than God, whether it is one's own self or someone else. If it is for someone else's satisfaction and for people, it is outward shirk and fiqhi riyah. If it is for one's own satisfaction rida, it is hidden and inward shirk. In view of the Urafa, Gnostics this also invalidates the ibadah and makes it unacceptable to God. Examples of it are offering the nightly prayer to Hajj for increase in one's livelihood, or giving Zakat for increase in one's wealth. Although those ibadat are valid, and one who performs them is considered to have performed his duty and fulfilled the requirements of the Sharia, they do not amount to the sincere worship of God Almighty, nor are they characterized with sincerity of intention and purity of purpose. Rather, this kind of ibadat are aimed to achieve mundane purposes and to seek the objects of lowly desires. Hence the acts of such a person are not rightful. If a person expels the love of the world from his heart by means of self-discipline and persistent struggle against his mundane desires, he will be the same in solitude and company, inwardly and outwardly. And if someone leaves the habitat of the self to migrate to God as mentioned in the Quran, whoever goes forth from his house an emigrant to God and his messenger, and then death overtakes him, his wage will have fallen on God. 100 and sets out on a spiritual journey, and thereafter he encounters complete annihilation fana, etam, his reward lies only with God, the exalted. How to preserve ikhlas. A few practical points. If you have done some good actions solely to please God, helped someone or are performing obligatory or supererogatory acts of worship, then know that you can never be secure from the evil of Satan and your lowly self nafs al-amara until the end of your life. You must exercise vigilance, as your low self may prompt you to make a verbal mention of it in front of your friends or acquaintances, or to express it in the way of a subtle hint without directly mentioning it. For instance, if you are regularly observing night prayers, your low self may prompt you to pass a hint by speaking about the good or bad weather conditions at daybreak or about supplications or the call for Fajr prayers, thus polluting your act of worship with riyah. You must, thus resist all such tendencies. You must keep a watch over yourself, like a kind physician or nurse, and not let the rebellious self get out of control. For a moment of neglect may give it the opportunity to break its reins and lead your sincere actions into ruin. Purification of intention from all levels of duality shirk and showing off riyah, constant vigilance over it, and its perseverance in purity makes up a difficult task. Try to remind yourself of your duties and judge your intention and actions in the light of following verse of the Holy Quran. Say, truly my prayer and my service of sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. 162. Relationship of Sabr and Ma'rifah of God. As long as a person feels inner anguish over the misfortunes and hardships of life, his Ma'rifah, gnosis of God remains deficient. When a person achieves contentment rida and satisfaction at the misfortunes and adverse conditions, his soul reaches a higher station of nearness to God. Sabr in regard to abstinence from sins and fulfillment of duties ta'at is related to deficient knowledge of the secrets of ibadat worship and the hereafterly forms of acts of sin and obedience. When a person firmly believes that what he is going to obtain in the other world after death is a form of his own deeds performed in this worldly life, he will have no distress while going through hardships and hostile situations. Rather, such a person becomes happy with the difficulties encountered in the fulfillment of divine duties. His joy becomes more than the anguish of a normal person over such difficulties. His attachment to God increases during adverse circumstances. A manifestation of such a High station of Rida was exemplified in the personalities of companions of Imam Hussein in the event of Karbala. Imam Reza said, among the exhortations of Prophet to Abu Darda, if you are able to act for the pleasure Rida of Allah with firm conviction, then do so. And if this is not possible for you, then practice sabr on unpleasant matters, as it will bring plenty of blessings. Al-Majlisi, Bahar al-Anwar, Volume 82, page 136, Hadith number 21. The outcome of sabr. Sabr produces many good results that include soul's training and discipline. If a person bears patiently with misfortunes and calamities for some time and seriously endures the hardships entailed during worship, rites and the bitterness arising from the renunciation of forbidden pleasures, and if all this is done for the sake of obedience to his Lord and Provider, it gradually becomes easy for him to bear with the hardships and difficulties. The soul of a patient person relinquishes its earlier uncontrolled state, and he develops an enduring luminous faculty that raises him over the station of sabr to reach other higher spiritual stations. Practicing sabr while enjoining good and forbidding evil. Amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar makes a person more steadfast and firm. Anguish, anxiety and untoward body movements at the time of financial loss, death, natural disasters, etc. are the signs of soul's weakness. They deprive one's personality of stability and dignity, weaken the determination, and enfeeble the intellect. At such delicate moments, sabr is key to the gates of felicity and deliverance. It strengthens the will and the power of resolution to overcome adverse circumstances. Make rational decisions and act wisely. Sabr in regard to sins is the source of the self's taqwa, fear of God. Sabr in regard to obedience ta'at is the source of intimacy with God and His love. And sabr in misfortunes is the source of rida with divine destiny and decrees. Higher levels of sabr. Sabr fi Allah, sabr in God. It means steadfastness while endeavoring to get rid of evil habits, e.g. lying, slandering, greed and ugly traits, e.g. egoism, hypocrisy, envy, and practicing abstinence from the objects of love and attraction, e.g. avoiding haram music, giving up sleep for night prayers, eating moderately during self-purification. It is the denial of selfhood in the path of the beloved God. This stage belongs to the wayfarers al-sulik. Sabr ma